Well, today we're going to look at Eastern religions, chapter 22 in your book. And there's several limitations we're going to take in this because they are very complex and there's a lot of different doctrines in each one of them. We're only going to look at a few fundamental doctrines of some of the largest religions in the eastern part. Asia is probably the largest, most populous continent on Earth. It's the birthplace of most of the world's major religions. Today we're going to talk about Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. In the chapter, there's a little section on Confucianism. I probably won't have time to deal with that today. We'll try to just get through Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. And like I said, again, just some of the major doctrines, just to give you a little understanding into these large belief systems held by a lot of people. Basically, they fall into three general traditions. There is the Theravada, there is the Mahayan, and there is the Tibetan Buddhism. So we're going to kind of go through some of these in a way that hopefully will be helpful to you. And we're going to start with Hinduism. Now, there are seemingly an infinite number of teachings and rituals and beliefs that form Hinduism as it's practiced today. But it started in the Indus Valley, which is Pakistan, about 3000 BC. It migrated north in the second millennium BC, and as it did, it took with it those sacred rites and rituals, but it also blended with those tribal peoples of the north and developed in what we call the Hindu society of today. The first time that the Hindu scriptures, or the Vedas, were written proclaiming that Brahman was the ground for all being. The early Hindu practices are often referred to as the Vedic religion or Brahmanism. But Brahman is their idea of the ground for all being. Everything is about Brahman. He is the everything, the beginning, the great power, the consciousness. The writings are called the Dharma in Hindu, and that simply means the teaching. It describes the all-encompassing way of being in the world that envelops every part of a person's life and forms their personal identity and experiences. The fundamental doctrine which all Hindu worship flows in the notion that the pure absolute truth, the ground of all being, is Brahman. Hindu teaching explains that Brahman is the universal soul or the universal self. As such, all individual souls come from Brahman, and all souls will eventually unite with Brahman. He is the root, indeed the pure, that is Brahman. The immortal everything. He is everything. On it all the worlds rest. There is no one soever who goes beyond it. It is that pure being. There is a sense in which Brahman is transcendent and impersonal and distinct from the rest of existence that cannot be fully known. But as the foundation of all things, Brahman is also immanent and personal, similar in the essence with the rest of creation, known as the God among gods. But there's a human dilemma. Whereas the universal self is called Brahman, the personal self is called Atman. Hindus' doctrine of personal self teaches that the physical body is nothing. The true nature of a person. The body is nothing more than a weak vessel which resides the thing that is truly human, and that is the pure soul, that is the Atman. To overcome this separation, because your soul is trapped in this body, if you will, to overcome this separation, people must realize that the Atman within them and within all living things is not radically different from Brahman, but as essentially the same. So the enlightened truth is that the Atman and Brahman are ultimately one, and the realization of this unity is the highest ideal of the Hindu teaching. In other words, that soul on the inside, that immaterial part, needs to be at one with the Brahman, the great soul of the universe. So, but the body has separated us, and we're going to talk about reincarnation and all that in a few minutes. Let's talk about the term karma. In terms of simple cause and effect, karma is the notion that every deliberate thought and action leads eventually to an equal measure of either pain or pleasure. Good thoughts and actions are rewarded with pleasurable experiences, while bad ones result in deserved punishment. Thus, people seek to do good works in order to bring a small amount of peace and contentment in this present life, but mostly to build merit for obtaining a better life to come, or better lives to come. Because the doctrine of the Atman says that the spiritual soul is what constitutes a person's true essence. Death is merely an end of the physical body, but the pure spirit self is then reincarnated into a new physical form according to the law of karma. In other words, if you have been a good person and you have had a lot of good thoughts and you've been kind and gracious and you've received these pleasurable experiences, then you're going to move up in your next life. But if you have negative karma or bad karma, you are going to move down in the spiritual realm because you're never ever going to die. You're simply going to come back in some other physical form. Which brings us to samsara. Samsara is the wheel of life. It's turned by karmic actions. According to the Hindu teaching, our souls are trapped within endless cycles of rebirths and redeaths. As long as we produce karma, we cannot escape samsara. Okay? It just goes on and on and on. We're going to be recycled, if you will. So the greatest pursuit in the Hindu belief is the practice to obtain release altogether from samsara to achieve moksha. Now, moksha, according to the Hindu teaching, people who acquire sufficient merit may be reborn in the blissful realm of heaven rather than returning to another life on earth. Yet, life in heaven is no more permanent than life on earth. And once a person's deposit of good works runs out or runs dry, then the law of karma moves them away and within the wheel of life. So, even in that, you're not going to be able to ever fully get away from the effects of karma. It just isn't going to happen. So that's one of those dilemmas. Now, let's talk about the many deities of Hinduism. Well, one of the most distinctive aspects of the Hindu practice is the worship of multiple gods represented by numerous images and statues displayed in homes, in their businesses and their temples. Yet if Brahman is the ultimate principle that unifies all reality, then why seek after anything less than one of the absolute truths? Well, it's the inner logic of the Hindu doctrine. Because the Atman within each of us and within each living thing is ultimately a manifestation of Brahman, it is then proper for people to provisionally seek powers of Brahman as exhibited in divine forms of created order. Put it simply, one person may choose to worship Brahman through Vishnu, while another person might prefer a more personal worship through Kali, the Divine Mother. Though each of these two devotees looks to a different god, all Hindu paths lead to Brahman. On the human level, this order of power means that people are reborn into particular varna or caste as determined by their previous karmic actions. So that's why you find the caste system in Hinduism. They believe that those certain castes in society are the result of karma, and therefore they don't associate willingly with people of lower karma, okay, of a lower class, because they're just receiving what they have earned due to their bad karma. So let's look at it from a missiological point of view. Well, effectively communicate the uniqueness of God revealed in Scripture. Clearly demonstrate that the ultimate release is only found in Jesus Christ. We must also demonstrate that the fullness of a life lived in the Holy Spirit and formed by the love, the grace, and the mercy of God the Father through Jesus Christ. In other words, we have to show them all the things that they're trying to seek by achieving good karma to get back into Brahma and to move up the scale. All of that release, all that they're searching for is found in the uniqueness of God through Jesus Christ. So that's the way to witness to them. Now we're going to shift gears. We're going to go into Buddhism. Buddhism, from the context of the southern Himalayan plains in the 5th century BC, Buddha preached new meanings into the old religious concepts. In so doing, he established his teachings as more than merely a reformed version of the Vedic practices, okay, but as the one and only true Dharma, the one and only true teaching. Here are some things that he taught. According to the Buddha, any kind of belief in an enduring personal self or Atman is false. Strictly speaking, neither you nor I truly exist, according to the Buddha. Consequently, the belief in any kind of supreme universal essence, Brahman or Atman, is likewise false. For the Buddha taught that the true nature of a personal existence is Ana-Atman, no self. The Buddha explained that what each person perceives as their self is nothing more than a cluster of 5 interdependent physical and mental elements. He called those form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Now, the Buddha taught that if we separate these 5 aggregates from one another, we find not an enduring self, but the dissolution of self. In other words, if you separate those 5 elements, your form separated from your feeling, separated from perception, from volition, from consciousness, then you don't exist. So ultimately, you don't exist. When you die, therefore, you don't exist. Those elements are no longer your possession. So, there is no self. And he talks about neither self nor no self. For the Buddhist thought, not being exists only in relationship to being. So if being does not truly exist, then neither does not being. Thus a person should no more believe in the existence of no self than in the existence of self, as either view reflects the same nature of things. Sounds a little confusing, right? Well, why would people listen to Buddha? Well, Buddha had his form of the good news. The word Buddha means an awakened one. A Buddha, then, is one who has traveled the path that leads to the realization that all things, has discovered and obtained this truth and teaches others the way to realization of this truth. Yet, the Buddhist teachings does not view this kind of truth as something that can be obtained by merely rational knowledge. Intellectual effort alone is not enough. Rather, by their own efforts, people must seek to orient every aspect of their life in such a way that they may become enlightened to the emptiness and impermanence of all things. This is why the Buddha does not himself save anyone, but simply points out the path by which people must strive to save themselves. I understand that this is a little out there and a little far-fetched, but it's what the Buddha taught. Let's look at the 4 truths that he taught. First of all, the Buddha provided 4 claims to help enlighten pilgrims along the way. The first one is suffering exists. Okay? You have to understand that suffering does exist. That craving is the cause of suffering. If you want to eat more, if you want to make more money, if you want to be promoted, if you have a craving for anything, that craving causes you to suffer. It causes you to suffer physically, mentally, emotionally. It causes you to suffer because you're trying to do something. The Buddha also taught that cessation of craving is the cure of suffering. That if you didn't crave anything, you wouldn't suffer anything. If you didn't crave food, you wouldn't be hungry. If you didn't crave affection, you wouldn't be lonely. If you didn't crave more, you wouldn't feel poor. So, craving, stopping craving, is the cure for suffering. And then the Eightfold Path is the way leading to the succession of suffering. Now, he taught that the basic human problem, people suffer because they thirst for existence. To overcome the thirst for existence, people must cultivate the appropriate thinking, speaking, and doing that will lead to a cessation of suffering. And that's the Eightfold Path. You got to stop thinking that you exist, and when you realize that you don't truly exist, then there is no such thing as pain or pleasure because you simply do not exist. Now, for the Buddhist, life and death and something else. The Buddha said that the causal movement of karma binds us all within the relentless cycle of samsara. Yet, because there is no I that dies and is reborn in a relentless cycle, death is simply the dissolution of the five aggregates. And rebirth is merely the gathering of these elements according to the deterministic character of karma. Still, any number of possible states exist that might be obtained depending upon the nature of previous actions. For example, good fruits of karma may result in the formation of a human life here on earth, or even an angel, or a god in one of the levels of heaven. But bad fruits of karma, however, may lead to the formation of a lower life form on earth, like a cockroach, or worse, a tortured inmate in one of the many levels of hell. So, still, none of these various states of existence is eternal, not even the blissful state of God. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent, and the thirst for life is nothing more than an ignorant craving for the permanence from that which is utterly impermanent. Thus, it is our unfulfilled desire for life that causes suffering. Relief is not found in quenching the thirst for life, but in extinguishing the thirst altogether. It is why the highest ideal in Buddhist thought, nirvana, is often described as the destruction or extinguishing of cravings. So it's not really death, it's not really life, it's something else, but whatever it is, it's not permanent. And you're going to fall back into this cycle again based on karma. Your five elements are going to be reassigned, but since there is no you, it's not going to be reassigned as you. It's simply going to be a regathering of these five aggregates. And the sooner you learn that there is nothing, that craving or desiring anything is wrong, the better off you're going to be. Well, a missiological perspective, okay? Buddha did not believe in a creator, okay? We must demonstrate that the God of the Bible is not Brahma, okay? That what we're talking about is not what Buddha was talking about. We must demonstrate that Jesus Christ is not just an enlightened one, but that he is God in the flesh, the one and only Son of the Most High God. So there are ways to reach the Buddhist, and there are ways to reach the Hindus, but we have to make sure that we always proclaim the deity of Jesus Christ. Now, very briefly, I'm going to try to talk about Taoism, okay? Now, Taoism, it has characteristics of Chinese philosophy. It is concerned for cultivating the harmony in the midst of opposites, an idea that is depicted in the yin-yang symbol, which illustrates the coexistence of the female yin forces and the male yang forces. Thus, Taoist and Confucians teaching generally focus on how to determine the appropriate action for obtaining harmony. So, let's talk about Taoism and the ultimate reality. The fundamental message of Taoism is that the ultimate reality is something called Tao. Tao is the originator of all things and the universal power that flows through all things. The term essentially means the way or path, with a fuller idea that it is simultaneously the way of the universe and the way to lead a harmonious life. Thus, the Tao seeks to explain the way and its power. Tao's teaching says that Tao gave birth to everything, but this act of creation was not the result of any kind of intention or desire, because the Tao is simply the invisible substance from which all things come to exist. The full meaning of the Tao, they say, is beyond description, and no one can say much more than it is a mystery, or rather the darker than any mystery, the doorway whence issues all secret essences. Well, the human problem. To follow the way of civilization, that is, to desire status, position, worldly knowledge, is to leave the natural way of the Tao. The expectation of duty and loyalty within the complex structures of government, organizations, and families bring imbalance into people's lives. As a result, we become anxious, controlling, demanding on one another, rather than being the source of peace. Civilization causes suffering. Banish learning, and there will be no more grieving, is one of their quotes. So, because the artificial nature of human development brings imbalance and disharmony, the way to bring stability is to return to the way of nature. When we contemplate the flow of the universe existence and discover the latent connection with the Tao that is within us, we are able to subdue personal desires and accept the inevitable courses of nature's and events. And like natural events, our actions, the we, no action, we will become in harmony. the notion of the woo-wee does not mean to take no action at all, but to take no unnatural action. We are to flow. We are to be in the way of harmony. So let's look at, just briefly, a missiological approach. The Taoists do believe in the great originator. However, they do not believe in the God of the Bible. So we do have a place to start with the Creator. We must help them see that only God has the power over the spirits. Taoists still believe in magic and charms and spells and evil. So we have to let them see that only God has power over the spirit world. And then only through Jesus Christ do we have the assurance of salvation in the afterlife. They have a real problem with that as well. So it's not that we can't witness to them, but we need to have an understanding that we need to make sure that they don't add Jesus Christ to their pantheon of beliefs when you're talking about Eastern religions, but that they see the uniqueness of God the Father and the God of the Bible. So I hope this brief, basic introduction helps you understand these basic world religions.